Welcome everyone. You're watching David Arhan, and today is quite a gracious morning. It's been a long time since I've actually been awake at these hours because a lot of my time has been busy. Today I want to kind of talk about my take on the atheism stuff. I usually don't talk about it as often, mainly because um, part of the reason why is I think the issues are very simple to understand, and a lot of it mostly is kind of like issues of not being able to accept certain things about believing in a religion. And I think I'm not really good at kind of dealing with that kind of stuff. You kind of just need more emotional support, with those kinds of people. I'm a horrible person with helping with emotional support, but I do, and this has been kind of like a issue I had for a long time with how the world is generally going with secularism and so on. And we can start. It stems from kind of how atheists themselves describe themselves. So when you kind of just assume what atheism is, and you point out that atheism is the belief that there is, God does not exist, right? There is no such thing as theism. A lot of them, you see people like Matt Dillahunt to say, no, 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 that's not what atheism is. Atheism is just that I haven't been given evidence, right? First of all, the position that you don't believe in God, but you're not you're not saying that there is no God 100%. That position is called agnostic atheism. First of all, that's not atheism. Atheism is saying that, yes, I am absolutely certain that there is no way God can exist, right? A lot of atheists are actually agnostic atheists, but they call themselves atheists. And secondly, this kind of arguments like, well, I don't believe in God because I haven't seen any proof for it. And this is where I want to get into the video. It's like there is no proof for it. Now, what even is proof? What proof are we talking about here? Many atheists today are materialists, if not pretty much all of them. Many of them are materialists. That means that the only things that they believe that they exist is something that has to be material, right? If it's material and they can know it with the scientific method, it's something that exists, right? They can know it from the effects or something like that. They can observe it with their eyes of what's going on with the effects. So for example, gravity, right? Um, these people will, for example, say, well, we know gravity because we have, mass science, right? Scientists did stuff, and we know by calculations and blah, blah, blah. We know gravity is true. We know that this bottle is empty, right? Because we're looking at it. We know that the earth is round because smart scientists told us the earth is round, so on and so forth. But this gets to kind of a problem here, and that is that some of these things that these people are believing in or arguing for the existence of, some of these things are invisible. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that it's a war against the invisibles, but they're using invisible things to argue for it. So again, follow through this to if you want me to illustrate an example to you. God doesn't exist because there is no empirical proof of him. So we can't know if he exists or not. We have never seen him, we have never documented him or anything like that. Okay, what is the proof of ethics, right? Does ethics exist? Is there such a thing as ethics, or is it something that we made up? Now, if it's something that we made up, then ethics, morality, they're just human constructions. They don't actually exist. Therefore, drinking water is just as morally, it's on the same moral quality as murdering someone. Or committing genocide is on the same moral quality as giving money to the poor. It's just, at the end of the day, it's personal preference. It's just human constructions, things that we made up in our minds. They don't exist in reality. They're not there. It's not something that we can even comprehend, because it's something that's not even comprehensible because it just doesn't exist. Morality is just something we made up, right? That's kind of like Stirnerist. It gets to the Stirnerist idea. It's like everything is a ghost. The idea is that if these things, if we're really going to believe in materialism, then everything is a ghost, including matter itself, because the way we process matter, in a way, is fundamentally based on immaterial metaphysical philosophy and so forth. So, but we can use this for any other, mathematics, right? Or logic, for example. Is logic also a human construct? where I'm going with this is that a majority of people will eventually say, yes, I believe X exists, but it's not material. So it's immaterial. So it's invisible. It's not something that you can produce a scientific proof for. As a matter of fact, it is not part of science per se, but it is what undergirds science. So without it, you don't have science. Uniformity of nature, for example, that the past is going to be like that the present is like the past is like the present. That the sun rises from the east and goes down, dies, right? It's on the west and just goes, that's just constant, right? That's not going to change. There's not going to be a time where the sun rises from the north and then falls on the southwest or something like that, right? That's, for example, an example of uniformity. Well, uniformity is what undergirds science, but can you show uniformity is something that is based on faith. It is not something based on a scientific progress, right? It is not something that is based on empirical observation per se. You can, at most, you can say, well, the sun has shown this kind of emotion ever since we started looking at it, but that is no guarantee that tomorrow it is going to be the same. The assumption that it's going to be the same tomorrow is fundamentally based on faith. And in fact, some people say, well, they might make an argument something like, well, the more it occurs, the higher chance that it continues to occur. First of all, that's not uniformity, because that's a probabilistic argument. But secondly, we have the replication crisis in science, where things that were replicated in the past cannot be replicated anymore. So that argument itself is kind of it's on a questionable ground. The point that I'm trying to make here is that even the scientist, even the materialist, even the atheist operates under assumptions of faith, operates under the assumption of belief in invisible things that they cannot see with their eyes, but they claim to have access to. How do they have access to? Well, that's, they will say, well, we have access to our, brains. But how can a material thing have access to something that is immaterial? Isn't that a good question? I mean, how can we have access to things that are not material? Aren't we all fully material? Then wouldn't that mean that there is something about human beings that is also not material, that is also connected to us as material, right? Well, this is where the soul comes in, right? So if you believe in the soul, then it's very easy to argue for such a thing. But wait a second. If you believe in the soul, if you believe in logic, if you believe in ethics, if you believe in morality, then what is the, how can you believe in these things? Where is the proof? Wait a second. The proof is that if they didn't exist, the world will make no sense, right? So it's kind of like an argument from the contrary. It's impossibility of the contrary, in a way. So that can be used as a proof. That is a proof that you can use to prove that something exists. It's that it not existing is not true, therefore it exists. Well, this is the point that I'm getting at in this video, and I want to keep this short. I want to keep this like a super long talk. A lot of very smart people have done these talks that I'm doing. I'm kind of trying to give this like basic baby rundown. But any argument, really, this is where it gets to, any argument that you can make against the existence of God is an argument you can make against the existence of mathematics, ethics, these kind of things, right? These immaterial, conceptual, invariant realities that we have access to, that we have an understanding of as human beings. And it seems like it's us that have understanding of these things. I mean, even intelligent animals like dolphins, it doesn't seem like they have understanding of these things, right? Dolphins might be smart, right? There might be smart dog breeds, but a dog breed is never going to be able to understand what ethics is, right? It's never going to be able to understand what mathematics is. I mean, he might have some sort of an idea, right? But it's never going to be able to understand these things on the same level as we are going to be able to, because we're just made in a completely different way. So for instance, if your argument against God is that it's in, there's no evidence for it, right? There's no material evidence for it. First of all, immaterial things are not to be dealt on a scientific level. That's kind of the big problem that a lot of these atheists have, is science is the study of the empirical realities, right? It's of the sensible world. When you're arguing for something that is not sensible, that is immaterial, science cannot account for that. But science itself requires immaterial things in order to be useful, right? Again, law of non-contradiction. Something can't be true and false at the same time. Science rests on that presupposition, right? Logic pretty much is that presupposition in a way. So this kind of shows you that, in fact, when we try to do science, or when we try to do archaeology or psychology, they are fundamentally based on invisible, immaterial things that are known through faith. How does Saint Paul define faith? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things that are not seen. It seems pretty, what I've just said seems very close, not pretty much on the point, with these immaterial categories that most people in the world believe, right? There's going to be some people that are going to bite the bullet and say, yes, I believe in subjective morality. Yes, I think that murder is just as good as giving money to the homeless. There is no moral difference between them, because moral difference is something that doesn't even exist, right? These people there are going to be people that are going to say these things, right? But a majority of the people are not going to be willing to take that deal, because they don't live life that way. That's not how they live life. They live life as if there's something that's good, something that's bad, that it's universal, it goes across all cultures, and that they have to abide by these rules, right? But this kind of gets, we're kind of reaching the end, and someone might still say, look, David, you talked all this much, okay, I get it, but you still haven't gotten to God, right? Like, where is God in this step? And this is where I kind of want to finish this video with a very basic, kind of like a presuppositional or transcendental argument, whatever you want to call it, for the existence of God. It's kind of just like X exists, X has to exist because of Y has to exist because of Z, X exists, therefore Z exists. It's kind of like an argument like this. If you watch Jay Dyer's debate with Molly Meme, who those who know Molly Meme, who he is, know who I'm talking about. He shows this argument in a more detailed manner, but pretty much what we're getting at is that we know then that logic exists, and logic is immaterial, invariant, and conceptual, right? So we know logic exists, but in order to logic to exist, I mean, what's the justification for logic's existence? Right? It's a whole different question. What's the justification for its existence? And it can't just be something random going through kind of like an immaterial plane, right? And at the same time, logic is also connected with the world that we live in, with the universe that we live in. As a matter of fact, ethics is something, that concerns this world, concerns human beings especially. You can even argue that it concerns how human beings should treat animals and other parts of nature as well. I'm not making a vegan argument here, by the way, but you don't have to be a vegan to admit that we should still treat even those who are not human beings fairly. How is it possible that these things are connected with the world? And I've said that you have to believe in the existence of a soul. Yes, okay, but how can you even bridge between the material world and the immaterial world? What is the bridge between them, right? What is the mediation between them, and how can they relate to the world that we live in? What is the justification of these things, and how do they have order and uniformity in the way that we have in nature today? The uniformal principle. Well, the only way that they can have some kind of a principle where it maps onto the world that we can have access to is the existence of a personal divine mind, because it's a mind that creates the distinctions between logic, ethics, the world, people, etc. It is the mind that creates these kinds of distinctions. Saint Athanasius kind of makes this argument, I believe, against Stoicism, where You have to believe in a divine mind in order to have distinctions in reality. So distinctions in reality exist because there's a divine mind. But this divine mind is also personal. These things aren't just accidents, but they have an order behind it. And this order is due to the fact that there's a personal divine mind that is somehow, for some reason, interested in the created world, specifically with the people who have access to these things, human beings. He has a special interest in these beings, right? And he also, the way he is able to bridge the gap between the created and the uncreated. Perchance, maybe God is a mediator between God and man. And the way he is a mediator is due to the incarnation, perhaps. And God has some of these eternal attributes. Some of these attributes, are dependent on the fact that there are eternal persons. So, for example, love, right? How can God be eternally loving if he is the only person that is eternal, right? Because love is a relational reality. It is a relation between two things, with love being manifested between them, right? That's why, for example, as we Christians will say that God is a Trinity, that God is eternally loving because the Father eternally loves the Son and the Holy Spirit manifests that love. Or suddenly we're getting into the Trinity. Suddenly Trinity is starting to make sense, right? And again, I'm not going to go too much into detail and just like go all in with this. What I want to kind of just like give an introduction and some of the main problems that I have with atheism and why I think those problems really are not reconcilable with any other model, right? I mean, because the only responses you can have is just, oh, well, logic exists, but we don't know why, we don't know how we can access it. It just is, right? It just is. Logic just is. It's not an argument that you want to make because I can just say God just is. There we go. Debate ended, right? God just is, right? So we need to be able to explain why these things exist. And the only reason we can explain these things, in my view, in my opinion, is because God exists. So that's a proof for God's existence, right? So there is your proof for the existence of God. And you will notice that any proof for the existence of God is going to be rational and logical, but at the same time, it is going to be based on faith as well. Because why? Because faith concerns the world, the invisible world, right? Faith is fundamentally about the invisible world. As St. Gregory the Dialogus, in fact, makes this argument, is that those who argue against faith will inevitably use faith in any part of their lives, because faith is something concerns, trust in things or people that we cannot see, that we cannot meet, right? There was I don't know what TV show this was, but this segment was Science Might Be Wrong Sometimes or something like that, where the guy is basically arguing, against evolution, and he says, evolution is not true because I believe in the Bible. And the guy and the people, his friends are saying, that doesn't make sense. You're just trusting what a bunch of people years ago wrote, right? And then he asks, okay, so what do you believe in? And he says, well, I believe in the scientists. I believe in data and peer-reviewed studies. And the guy, the guy who's arguing for anti-evolution just asks, well, have you seen those research? Have you seen that research yourself? Have you talked to those scientists yourself? No, you haven't. In fact, there is really no difference between your belief in scientists and my belief in the apostles, right? And I know that I am aware that that's supposed to be like a parody against people who make those arguments, but I think it really failed its purpose at trying to make fun of the people who make that argument, because the arguments he was making, even if it was in jest, was in fact sound, because he just used their own criteria against them. He used the atheistic criteria against them and made them realize, look, your position is based on faith just as much as mine is. In fact, yours is even more, right? Yours is even more based on faith. Yours is an even bigger leap of faith. At least I'm arguing for something that is both reasonable and also based on faith, right? So again, we might get some weirdo people coming here and say, oh, you believe Sky Daddy, you believe writings made by men from 5,000 years ago, and you just blindly believe them. You're going to get arguments like this. I can assure you that there's much more to it than just saying, well, these guys wrote a book, so I'm just going to believe it. There's much more to it, right? And this is where I kind of want to leave it with a hint, is where we get into worldviews, right? What the apostles, what the prophets were presenting us is a worldview, right? And there are certain aspects of a worldview that is going to be pretty much based on presuppositions, right? Based on, and again, even materialistic worldview is based on presuppositions, as I've shown in this video. Every worldview is going to have its presuppositions, but the way we are going to be able to critique other worldviews, first of all, is by having a worldview, comparing it with the other, and trying to find the inconsistencies in that worldview, right? So that's kind of what has been my approach, right? Materialism. There's nothing that exists that is immaterial, right? Nothing that exists that is immaterial, or if there is, we don't know, right? We can never know such things. But such an argument, in fact, isn't that immaterial? And isn't that kind of an, the knowledge of that argument, isn't that immaterial in itself? Anyways, I want to leave it off with here. I think it went on long enough. Hopefully it's something that people are going to be thinking about, and I'll post some video. I'll have some videos linked to the description below if you want to listen to a more detailed breakdown of what I'm talking about from people who have been studying these things for much longer than I have. This is again kind of like a introduction, kind of like an introduction-ish course or something like that, an explanation, because I think a lot of people don't even understand the basics and they try to get to the advanced aspects. So once you understand these things and what I'm trying to mean here, the arguments for the existence of God and why atheism is fundamentally inconsistent is going to be much clearer. Thank you for watching, and if you like this, like the video, share, subscribe, give money, whatever. Subscribe if you haven't, and I will see all of you in the next video. Thank you for watching. May God be with you all.